Hey guys, Joe Miles here with ASIO Gear. This is the Mission Whitetail Podcast. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what it truly takes to kill these mature bucks. We're going to step outside the box and look at the why for gear, tactics, training, and more importantly, the mindset from over 35 years of chasing these magnificent animals all over North America. Thank you for following along and welcome to Mission Whitetail.
All right, guys, welcome back. Mission Whitetail. Got a really unique, cool guest today. He and I met in Virginia at the Lone Wolf Custom Gear Mobile Hunter Roadshow. Had a good time up there. Damon Bungard is with Jaeger Tracks, and he does a lot of deer recovery with the main man laying right beside him, Jaeger, who I got to spend some time with, and quite a dog. And I thought it would be really neat to get Damon on to talk about tracking deer, especially wounded deer, mistakes guys make. You know, if you do a gut shot, how long do you need to wait? Just kind of go from soup to nuts, you know, because Damon, you've had a long hunting career as well as experience with tracking animals with a dog and by yourself as well. But give everybody, Damon, if you don't mind, a little background on you and Jaeger and what you guys do.
Sure. Well, yeah, it's great meeting you up there, and thanks for having us on. Always happy to talk tracking and tell hunting stories. Yeah, I've been hunting, my whole life. Worked a lot in the outdoor industry. A lot of people know me from Jackson Kayak, and I've been marketing and product management in the outdoor industry. And lived in Tennessee for a long time. Now we're up in Virginia. We moved up here. But, we started, I've hunted, again, a lot of species, a lot of weapons, a lot of styles. And, eventually my hunting kind of extended into tracking as a way to kind of, help other hunters. And because everybody knows the horrible feeling in your stomach when you feel like you've shot one and lost it. And, I started making videos of Jaeger working largely to help myself. There's not a lot of training out there for tracking. There are some groups and there's various tests you can do. But I started recording him working so I could go back and study the footage and learn to read him better and read what he was telling me. And then I started just seeing good lessons in it. So that could help other handlers or other hunters, and so I just he's just laying out. So I started editing the videos and putting together, showing start to finish, soup to nuts. Here's the sign, here's why the dog behaved the way it did, and then try to put some good lessons in it and help people make better decisions. Because ultimately, our life as trackers is much easier if certain decisions are made, and there's a lot of times, if different decisions were made, the help of a dog wouldn't be needed, period. And so those videos, again, people started liking them. You can check them out. They're on the Jaeger Tracks channel on YouTube and Instagram and other places. But it's kind of become a thing. And, I had fun making his own brand. And, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Jaeger needs a brand. And like, if you look close, his everything in his logo is made of deer antlers or bird wings.
Oh, that's really neat. Yeah.
Eyebrows or elk antlers, so things like anyway. So it's fun. It's been fun taking them to seminars and making videos and helping other trackers and hunters just kind of be better after the shot, because so much of recovery is is really a function of decisions the hunter makes after the shot. You only have two things you really control: the shot you take and then what you do after it.
Yep.
And a lot of times that what you do after it really impacts more than people think their odds of recovering that game.
Yeah, that's good, man. And again, I think this is something, I definitely benefited from and learned, up there listening to you and your seminar at the Mobile Roadshow, And one of the things that I've always found so interesting is the I guess you could call it a fallacy or wives' tale. And this is kind of what I've got is question number one, or topic number one, is the blood colors and bubbles in blood. And I see, for guys that are just listening that cannot see Damon's face right now, he has a huge smirk on his face right now, because he and I laughed about that, especially the blood and bubbles means I got lung. So, man, dive into the blood colors, because I mean, even to the, yesterday I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw like this was a company that posted different color blood on arrows and stuff like that, and them going, oh, this is definitely liver, this is definitely lung, this is gut, whatever it may be. So, man, dive into that a little bit and what you have found or uncovered there.
Sure. So, obviously those charts are very prominent, and there's some truths to them, but the reality is we live in the gray area of where things aren't what they seem. And honestly, if a hunter sends me a photo of an arrow, it's great. I'll look at it, but I don't even place a lot of weight anymore in what's on that arrow. I've seen great looking arrows that aren't lethal. I've seen terrible looking arrows that are lethal. Especially when you get into quartering shots. A lot of times, you can have a good entry but a bad exit, and there'll be white hair on it, and the arrow might get swabbed by belly fat or even intestine on the way out, and it doesn't look great, or vice versa. So I totally rely on his nose at the hit site far more than a photo of an arrow. Like, he'll know within 100 yards. He'll tell me within 100 yards if that deer's alive or dead, just because he knows, and whatever's going on in that noggin of his, he knows an organ scent versus a muscle wound scent. And we'll find the organ ones, and he'll be quiet, and he knows he'll walk to it, and he'll want to hunt the muscle wounds because he knows we need to hunt that to actually get it. How he knows, I don't know. Whatever.
Fascinating.
But he does. And you often hear trackers, the hunters, how do you know? I'm like, well, because the dog's telling me, and they don't get it because they don't work with the dog, but they do put off signals that once you know your dog, you'll understand. But back to the point of blood, what I like to tell, and again, I'll take any photos if anybody's listening and they think they may need the help of a dog. Mark blood on Onyx, take photos of it. The more information you can give any handler, they're going to appreciate. It's all anecdotal. They'll process it too in their decision making, but it will help with decision making and even the strategy of how and when to bring the dog. So what I tell people with blood is, and most people don't realize this, all blood is red. Blood is red. So we'll establish that blood is red. There's very dark red blood. There's very bright red blood. And ultimately all that means is the level of oxygenation in the blood. Blood with a lot of oxygen in it is red, very red. And blood that's deoxygenated, like vein blood, is dark. So what's coming back to the heart, versus, and it's low pressure, so it's not often shooting out, it's dripping out, and then high pressure blood in arteries is what's going out, being pumped out. So, there's a video on the Jaeger Tracks channel, because if you hear that, oh, I got dark blood, shot liver, dark blood, shot liver. So as I explained up there, and this is a real world story, we had a call for a track, and I got dark blood, and in this case, the deer had been shot, like back leg, like Achilles. And
the furthest away from the livers you can get.
Yeah, and what it was 2 streaks of blood. And I tell people, if you cut a deer's hoof off, or you cut your own hand off, and you hold it down, and you swing it, there's going to be 2 lines. One's going to be bright red, one's going to be dark red. That's just blood going one way, blood coming back.
Right.
And so a lot of people, when they see the dark blood, it's all automatically liver. There's another video on the Jaeger Tracks channel where I proved this, and again, it was a hunter called. I got dark blood, and we tracked it, and it ended up being a quartering shot through the jugular, right under the chin. And I was like, this is as far from the liver as you can get on a whitetail.
Right.
Unless you shoot his nose off. But yes, this is, just to prove, this is vein blood, and it's super dark. The reality is liver blood is almost black, especially after it dries. And it's also extremely hard if you look at the way the lobe of a liver lays in the chest cavity, it's extremely hard to shoot pure liver. Most of the time, it's a quartering through when you're getting liver gut or you're getting liver intestine or liver lung. There's usually something else involved. But liver blood, fresh liver blood, it almost looks like black pudding. Even it usually has some consistency to it. Just like if you were to mash up, liver, a fresh piece of liver in your hand, it kind of crushes funny, right? It's got some texture to it. But liver blood itself is usually, it's a very almost maroonish black. Whereas dark vein blood is more of a dark red. But again, it's all anecdotal. And ultimately, again, the dog will tell you. But usually, again, that's a sign of, all right, let's just be cautious. Liver shots in particular, even quartering shots that do involve the liver, that may be a quick death, or it may easily be 6 hours or more. So usually my default, especially if a hunter thinks he may have hit back, maybe has some dark blood, is a 6 hour wait.
6 hour wait. What and I want to get into that next, but let's circle back on bubbles, because you hear that a lot too. You hear, I got bubbles, I got lung, we ought to be able to go right in here and find him. Dispel that myth of bubbles, if you will.
Okay, so bubbles it's another great example. We're always taught we got bubbles, it means lung. Well, bubbles can mean a lot of things outside of lung. And the reality is, lung bubbles tends to be very, very small, very dense, and almost foamy to the point as it looks like it's almost like a sponge you could pick up and scrub your dinner plate with. Whereas other sources of bubbles easily come from arteries. I'll show in videos or images on the Jaeger Tracks site where neck artery shots, leg artery shots often will have bubbles, simply because, just like if when men pee on the ground and it foams a little bit, sometimes just splashing liquid on itself, especially a artery or a significant muscle wound, front brisket, they bleed a lot. Again, certain arteries will quickly bleed out a deer. Other arteries they can actually heal from. But that blood splashing as it kind of splatters on itself is just kind of makes little waves which can essentially roll over, and blood's got enough viscosity to it, as they roll on itself, it traps air, and as that blood settles, bubbles can form in it. They'll tend to be bigger bubbles, almost pinky nail size, not quite as sponge looking as lung blood would be, but it's a common one. Just simply a good gushing muscle wound for a while. A deer will run, it'll stand there, and it's bleeding. Especially front leg wounds, gunshot wound, low leg, or archery wounds into the shoulder even. They'll be bleeding pretty profusely for a while, and then somebody will call and I got bubbles and I got great blood for 1,000 yards. It's like, blood for 1,000 yards is never great.
Right. Yeah, yes, that's not good.
It's not a good thing. Trust me, that's usually the sign of a wounded deer that's going to keep on going. So everybody thinks when they got blood for a long way, it's great. It's actually a really bad sign. But that's a common one. The other common one for bubbles and blood is what I call the armpit shots. Whether maybe it's a front quartering, and that arrow actually can travel. Deer don't have a ball joint like we have in our shoulder. It's just muscle holding on that shoulder blade to the chest cavity, and it's just connective tissue. So an arrow can actually pass through that without hitting any kind of a hard obstruction. And if you've ever quartered game, when you lift that front leg and you're slicing under there to lift that shoulder off, it kind of sounds like you're cutting foam.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it kind of pops, and even, and what happens is if that arrow or bullet passes through that cavity as that deer is running, blood is filling into that foamy stuff, and it can almost get pumped out and fall to the ground. And then it may even look, again, almost like lung blood, but it's going to have really big bubbles in it. It's not fine bubbles. And it's common on front leg rifle shots, frontals, to blow that whole leg out. And you won't, if you're tracking on leash like we have to by law where we live, that's a very hard deer to recover. If you live in a state that allows off-lead bay dogs, often those can be recovered. But a lot of times that blood that you're seeing there is the armpit shot. And it can also happen on steep quartering bow shots, where you kind of tuck it in, you think you're going to get it in, in front of the shoulder and try to get into the heart, and the deer moves a little bit or whatever. But you can send that arrow through that zone and not get into the chest cavity at all, and you get good blood because you hit some decent muscles and different things, and also there's foam in it. But it's not
fatal.
You're not through the lungs at all.
Well, that's good. Well, I thought that was important because you hear all, and I think you coined it. It's anecdotal, right? People, and we'll get into more of this as we go. But there's things. Yeah, I hit liver. I got lungs with and it's not necessarily the case. So I think dispelling that and bringing real, proven results that you've gotten over time can kind of dispel some of those wives' tales or myths or anecdotal conclusions that guys come to, when they're tracking deer. Another one is, you hear, and I know this from a lot of personal experience, is wait 4 hours on a gutshot deer. And I have found deer 24 hours later on a bad gut shot that were still very much alive. So if a guy sends one right through the grass basket, he hits a limb, pulls his shot, whatever it may be, and he sees it go right through the guts, what is your recommendation on that?
12-hour minimum. To your point, I don't like to track gut shots under 12 if I can avoid it. Now sometimes there's extenuating circumstances and you got to weigh those. Maybe somebody's leaving town or whatever. But again, usually when that happens, we end up pushing that deer and having to finish it. Whereas if it had just been left alone, that deer would have been dead in its bed and much easier to find. So my general default 12 hours. If I can give it 24, give it 24. The reality is most mortally wounded deer, including gut shots, will bed and die within 300 yards of where they were hit if they're left alone.
Yep.
And not pushed.
That is 100% what I have seen, and I've had it asked a million times. I said, normally, if you're able to sneak out of there, the deer doesn't win you, and you're able to get out of there within 300 or 400 yards of where you shot it, if you can give it 14 to 24 hours, you will find that deer within 300 or 400 yards of where you shot him.
Spot on. And again, anecdotally, but the odds are in your favor. That is the best decision you can do to put the odds in your favor. And people worry about coyotes pushing it and this and that. I'm like, it doesn't matter. If you push it or the coyote gets on, it doesn't matter. That's out of your control. All you can control is how long you decide to wait. And it is what it is. And people worry about coyotes and gut. And the reality is, if you push that deer, all you're making is a gigantic cast net for coyotes to find it. That deer also knows if it's moving around, it's not safe. It wants to bed down. Look at the instinct of fawns. It's to bed and hold tight. And that doesn't necessarily go away as they get older. They'll let you get pretty close often before they blow out. And once they do blow out, then that even wounded, they can go easily a half mile real quick. And oftentimes then property lines get involved, other challenges get involved. Again, if he can smell it, so can a coyote cutting that track. It's going to turn and follow that buck. The shorter the distance from the hit site to where that buck beds is always better.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, is that either you're going to kick the deer or the coyotes are going to kick it. And if you kick it, you've just laid a lot more ground scent for the coyotes to pick it up and find him anyway.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So on the gut shot deer, minimum of 12, better to give 24.
Yes. Yeah, and certainly, again, like early season, really hot, you hear, again, some of the wise tales, gut shot deer run downhill to go to water. Sometimes. I can tell you, I've found gut shot deer on top of mountains. And they didn't go down; they went up. I talked about this too. I don't have any set rules about, and I've learned to get out of my mind of thinking about where the deer's going to go. The dog will tell you. Let the dog do the work. I've seen bucks run uphill. I've seen them run downhill. I've seen them die in water. I've seen them, bedded near water. Certainly in the South, in particular, early season when it is hot. Like gut shot animals, they do get thirsty. They need to drink anyway because it's hot. They'll often bed and be found near water. And that's true for anything that's wounded. It's just because it's hot. It wants to go somewhere cool, and it wants to go somewhere it feels safe and can drink. But, as I kind of talked about the analogy that I'll use, I was like, the reality is if God dropped a bag of marbles on the earth, half of them are going to end up in the water.
Yeah.
Just because things that move flow downhill in general. So as wounded game is moving or being bumped, it will eventually get weaker and weaker. And as it's even traversing mountainous terrain in particular, often end up in a gully it can't climb out of. And it'll keep getting funneled down, down, down. And yeah, oftentimes there's water where it ends up. Just by the nature of water flows downhill. Well, so does a lot of things that are weak. So some of it is just the coincidence. Sometimes it's certainly if there is only one water source nearby, again, within a few hundred yards and it's near a good bedding area, which is often a good bedding area because it has water in cover.
Yeah.
Like that's where you often find them. If I have any hard, fast rule, it's again, there's no rules, but mature bucks in particular, I'm talking, 5+ old bucks have a homing instinct to their core bedding area that is just different than younger bucks and does. Bears don't have this, like they'll just run. Whereas I see a lot of, and oftentimes younger deer, they get somewhat confused once they're wounded. And they just sometimes bed out of confusion almost. Whereas mature bucks just have a home, they'll move mountains and they'll do whatever they can to get back to their safest spot.
Sure.
Wherever it may be.
Yeah.
There's
that's a good point too. Is that those? And I shot a deer in Mexico and followed him back. I hit him too high, but I felt I owed it. I knew when I hit him that it was too high, and I probably wasn't going to recover him, but owed it to the animal. And I followed the blood as far as I could, and sure enough, he went all the way back to his bed. And what was so funny about it is we were hunting in very flat Mexico, and there was one little hill that kind of overlooked the access road to where we hunted. And we would never see that deer, or they would never see that deer when they hunted in the afternoons, but sometimes he would come through in the mornings. And the reason that is because in the afternoons he was bedded up on that rise, and he could see the trucks driving in, so he wouldn't show up in the on the afternoon hunts because he knew there were people around. And in the mornings, he was out feeding, doing his thing, and so he would so I just that's neat, and just proves your point again, is that those big deer will go back to their sanctuary.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, next up on the list, Damon. A guy shoots a deer right at dark or right at first light. His lighted knock doesn't go off. He can't tell he felt good about the shot, but he can't tell exactly where he hit it. He gets down. He can't find the arrow. He does find a little bit of blood. What do you say in that scenario?
Mark the blood and leave. Make mental note. Whenever a hunter calls, there's a lot of questions any experienced tracker is going to ask. They're going to ask a lot of questions about how big is the property, what weapon were you shooting, what was the range, what was the shot position, all of these type things. But the most important thing I'll often really want to hear about is what did the deer do after the shot? And regardless of, again, light of knock say or what you think, and sometimes you're hunting thick stuff where you can't see what the deer does. It's literally one jumping out of view. Sometimes, though, you're not, and you can maybe see it for 40 yards, 60 yards. And generally, what that deer behavior after the shot is often very indicative, more so even than what the arrow might look like. Certainly I want to know, do you think the arrow's still in it? Are you shooting a fixed blade or a mechanical? Do you have a broken arrow or solid, or all of these kind of factors, but, what color hair do you have, if you have any? But does that deer, run 40 yards and stop and then kind of walk with a hunch in its back, or like it's tucking its stomach? Often, most times, that's a good sign indicative of a gut shot. Again, you're going to want to give 12 hours minimum on that. Does its front shoulders fall, and maybe it runs almost, you hear about the death plow, or it'll run a little bit and then, then kind of get its wits back and travel off. That's usually a good sign of a vital hit, of a heart or lung. Oftentimes, if a deer runs panicked and bounces off debris or bounces off root balls, that's oftentimes a bad leg wound where they literally get confused because their leg's not working right, and they bounce off stuff till they figure out how to run on it. Does it run and trying to look around, kind of confused, and his tail flicking, and is it nervous? Do you see anything falling off? All of these things.
Yeah.
Often indicate the type of hit. People get wrapped up around mule kicks or not. They don't mean much. A scared deer. I've shot the dirt in front of a deer and watched them.
They're wanting to get the hell out of there. That's what they're doing.
So sometimes the mule kick from a hit. Sometimes the mule kick just because something scared them. And so those type things. A lot of people put a lot of weight in the mule kicks. I don't. Because I've seen it multiple ways. But in general, if you have minimal sign, but you do have blood on the ground, that's a great scenario of mark it, get a tracker out there. That dog will before you go looking around, searching. There's a difference between searching and tracking too. And oftentimes if you're on a human is tracking visible sign, great. But the second you switch from seeing sign to searching for sign with your eyes, that's probably a good time to call a tracker. And back out, mark that spot where you stopped, where you transitioned from tracking to searching, with your eyes for sign, and that any tracker will thank you for that. Keeping that scent virgin, and not tainted. People don't realize when humans are tracking, you're picking up deer scent on your boots, on your pants. Deer are also tracking freshly turned up soil and the smell of ground. You're doing all of that, and you're spreading deer scent everywhere, and that makes it harder for a tracking dog. And the cleanest you can keep that scent line where the deer actually went, that dog's going to be able to work faster, cleaner, and better odds of recovering your deer.
That's great.
So
great intel. What about, you hear guys say a lot of times, hey man, you hit this one in a leg artery, and the only way we're going to find him is to really press him. We've got to get down and go after this deer and press him, and make him bleed out. What have you found there?
So it's a sometimes. It's really hard to bleed that deer out from an archery wound to a leg. They just tend to be cleaner wound, it's a surgical cut into a big muscle. Oftentimes, maybe even that broadhead breaks. If hunter, I got 4 inches of penetration. Generally, it's you got two inches of penetration, and then maybe some blood ran out of the shaft, or it shattered as it ran, or whatever. But almost always, that's it's an embedded broadhead in a shoulder blade, and that will heal over. And you're not gonna recover that deer. Certainly not with a leashed dog. A set of bay dogs may be able to, again, hold that deer on the right size property in the right conditions to where then you can get a finishing shot on it. Rifle shots to the leg tend to be far more traumatic. And if you blow that upper bone or even lower leg bones, you have bone at its site. Oftentimes that leg is wounded traumatically enough where it's dangling and totally unusable. You might find pieces of meat. Those deer, if you keep them moving, can certainly get weak enough to the point that they're going to want to keep bedding and let you get close for a finishing shot. My personal best buck last season was that scenario even. And Jaeger, luckily I had him at home, and we got that buck, 1,700 yards from where I shot him.
Wow. Pretty long track. Yeah.
And I'll never forget seeing that thing just stand up as we got out of this grass. We took one step toward Jaeger, had a pistol on, and it was on.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate. But those hits do happen. And again, there is some truth to that. If you do keep that deer moving, he will keep bleeding. You can wear him out. And it's just a lot of times it's function of the terrain, the dog. I nearly killed Jaeger trying that on a brisket hit years ago, and we tracked that deer. This was like 28 hours after it had been shot over 2.5 miles through really rugged terrain, and it was going up and down, and it had bedded twice in that whole distance. And I just had to tell the hunter, we're just never going to get this deer on lead.
Yeah.
And Jaeger was bleeding from ears, nose. He cracked blood for 4 days after the track. Like it nearly killed him.
Oh gosh.
So those are all factors that go into, when you're on a track like that. Again, on leash is different than off leash. Those southern states, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, some parts of South Carolina, you can track off leash. Like, there's certainly those recovery odds go up simply because the deer can be bayed long enough for a follow-up shot.
Yep, no, that makes good sense. And I'm going to ask you about that. I'm so excited. I got all these questions that I want answers to that I know our listeners are going to appreciate too. And you touched on this one a little bit earlier. You said depending on broadhead. So let's talk about that, because the broadhead debate is massive, man. It's almost
what do you mean?
Yeah, it's almost as bad as Democrat and Republican. I mean, it is unbelievable. The mechanicals have definitely come a long way in the last couple years, or last really 5 years, and some of them nowadays are so good. And I won't say my preference, because I don't want to steer. Not that it would steer you one way or the other, but what have you found recovery wise, apples to apples, on like a good mechanical or a good fixed blade? What has been what do you get super nervous about, and what are you like, all right, we're probably going to find this?
Ultimately, and this listeners probably aren't going to like this, but shot placement matters far more.
Of course.
And it's all shot. And you'll hear a lot of trackers, bashing, the popular mechanicals, and a lot of times that's somewhat a function of their popularity. So they're shot more, so there's inherently more wounded deer from them. It's just simple math. What I will say is this: I personally only shoot fixed blades, and I did shoot mechanicals certainly a lot growing up, with good success. And ultimately, I switched to shooting to fixed blades because I want that guaranteed cut. I also want to know that if I leave a broadhead in an animal, that as it's moving, it's continuing to work for me and it's continuing to cut. I have tracked game that I am pretty sure killed itself by bedding down with an arrow in it and literally pushed the arrow into something more important in the act of bedding. And so mechanicals can move around easier in a chest cavity without actually cutting much. Fixed blade is always cutting inside that cavity. So that's, again, personal preference. I also, that I shoot traditional bows a lot. That's pretty much, nobody's shooting mechanicals with traditional bows for good reason. It's a different energy, just, impact, momentum, all those things. On my compound though too, I shoot fixed. And I'll add this. Anybody that wants to understand the penetration differences of mechanicals and fixed blades, energy is dispelled in the act of movement of those blades. If you take a brand new target, if you go get an average foam target, brand new, nothing shot, so all the material is the same, and you take your same arrow, same weight head, and you shoot a mechanical through one side of it, and then move 6 inches over, same distance, and shoot your fixed blade, and you tell me which one penetrates further. Every time I do it, my fixed blade's about that much further, 6 inches further through that target than the mechanical is.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
That is the energy of those blades unfolding. So to me, the same thing. Whenever I'm shooting, a lot of people, you hear this amongst rifle hunters a lot. They like it when they get an entry hole and all of the energy is then transferred into the animal and there's no exit hole. Baloney, man. Like, I want 2 holes. I always want 2 holes. The entry hole is often never a good bleeder. The best bleeder is always the exit hole, and that's true for a bullet or for an arrow. And as a tracker, more holes the better. The more scent coming out, the better. So I always opt for, I want more penetration. I want 2 holes. And again, it's only gonna help your odds of recovery.
Yeah.
But I know that there's another friend of mine, Shane Simpson. He's got a tracking app called Tracker. And he was collecting a lot of data on broadheads and, just unbiased, is gonna publish it. And as the data comes in, and I think you're going to find more mechanicals in the stats as needing tracks. But again, a lot of that's a simple function of the popularity of them over fixed blade.
Yeah. I think you've got way more. If you've got 100 guys shooting mechanicals and 40 guys shooting fixed, you're going to have more tracking jobs on mechanicals. So I am heavy in the mechanical camp, and shot a lot of stuff, tried them out a lot in Africa, and I will agree the first mechanicals that came on the market were junk. I think nowadays, especially G5 with their mega meathead and even that Rage Tri-Pan, not the regular Rage, but the Tri-Pan, I've had a lot of success with that, and I shoot a 470 grain arrow, 74 pounds, bow, 29-inch draw, shooting 300 feet per second. So it's scalding, and very rarely do I not get a full pass-through on just about anything that I shoot. My thinking on it, and correct me here because I really am curious, I would much rather – I think you have a better chance of hitting gut because that's such a big area – than you do hitting the shoulder bone, the actual bone. And I would rather have a big 2.25 inch cut through the guts with a mechanical than I would like a 1 1/8 inch cut through the guts. Both being, complete pass-throughs. So that's a little bit of what I would think. Maybe that is wrong. What is your thoughts on what are your thoughts on that?
No, I would say that's valid. Obviously, death from an arrow is ultimately from blood pressure loss and surface area of cut. That's just it. It's not like a bullet that the impact tears things apart inches away from the actual wound channel. With an arrow, what you cut is what matters, and it's down to the millimeter. And when you get into the marginal shots that aren't into the pump house, so to speak, the more cut you got, the better. I'm not gonna argue that one bit. You're snoring over here.
I want to get in there and join him.
Look, his feet are going. He's tracking in his sleep right now.
His legs are going.
So, yeah. He's like, you guys are talking about hunting. Yeah, this is great. So, yes, obviously, you never want to shoot the guts. In that scenario, though, the more damage you have being done, is always going to be better.
But it all boils down to shot placement and whether you're a mechanical guy. And I agree with your point earlier. In all the broadhead testing we've done, no question whatsoever, a good, well-built fixed blade head is going to penetrate better than any mechanical out there. That's we found that over and over and over again. So, and
on the flip side, I'm gonna add this. On the flip side, your example of shooting the guts, you want a bigger cut. The counter argument then is if you go forward though with a well-built arrow with a fixed blade, your odds of going through that shoulder blade and getting into one lung or arteries or heart is way higher than a mechanical that can sometimes, when it unfolds, almost weld itself into that shoulder blade.
Yeah, and that's where, arrow weight, arrow speed, and I don't want to get off subject here because we've got probably 10 podcasts on even Don Higgins and I had a debate. We debated each other and filmed it, and it was all in good fun. Don and I have been friends a long time, but yeah, I don't want to go down too far down that rabbit hole, or our listeners are going to turn off because they've heard me talk about the Broadhead Debate too many times. But that's good intel. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Let's see. Broadhead. All right.
From a tracker's perspective, I always want 2 holes.
Always want 2 holes. Yep. That's good. That's a very, very good point. All right. So let's pivot here a little bit. Let's say it's a guy from South Carolina, just because I am from South Carolina, and he's in an area where he doesn't have to track on lead. Is there and he wanted to get a tracking dog, right? Now, obviously, that's a commitment. It shouldn't be an emotional thing like, hey, I want to get a tracking dog. It should be some real thought. Do you have the time to train it, to spend with it, to do what it needs to really get it the life that it needs? But is there a breed or type of dog that, for me, for a guy that hunts a lot, shoots a lot of stuff, in an area where, and I think we're in an area where I don't have to have a lead. I'd have to verify that, but we're in Richland County. But is there, let's say that, yes, you don't have to have a lead. You can put a tracking collar on him and send him on his merry way, opportunity to bay the deer up. Is there a type of breed or dog that you would recommend for somebody in that scenario?
Yeah, so down in the South, there's a couple factors. Obviously, everybody knows I'm a Teckle guy. We can go down the rabbit hole of why I love Teckles, which is a working wire-haired dachshund, and they're bred to track through long lineages in Europe. But the reality is, there's a lot of good tracking breeds out there, and certainly in the South, there's different factors even between venomous snakes. Jaeger's he's always rolling in 4 low, right? Which means any snake hit is probably going to be to a very vital part of his body, face, neck, chest cavity. Whereas taller dogs, a strike to the foot or to the shin is much less consequence in general than one closer to vital organs. So there's the venomous snake factor.
Yep.
Which is significant in South Carolina, certainly lower half of the state, where you get into cottonmouth country.
Yeah, where we are.
Cottonmouth,
For sure.
Canebrake, copperheads, multiple species, and they're active during a lot of the hunting season. Where I would live in the mountains, they're a factor now. We have copperheads and timber rattlesnakes. But by the time October rolls around, they're pretty dormant and underground. They're not really a factor, whereas they can be a factor any time of the season in lower parts of South Carolina.
Yep.
So that's a factor. So that you tend to see taller dogs that can cover more ground faster. There's some pretty thick country down there, big briar thickets, dogs that can bound over it versus having all the Jaeger has to plow through it. So you'll see more curs, catahoulas, blue lacies, even bloodhounds, and you'll see even coonhounds also sometimes trained, and all dogs, even labs, can have their strengths and weaknesses. Randy Vick's a tracker down there. He's had some great labs over the years. So it kind of, the breeds have their strengths and weaknesses. I am certainly somebody that believes more in breeding than training. I believe, really good tracking dogs like Jaeger, it's a lot of it's genetic, and these are dogs that are bred to hunt. And make no mistake, he's not tracking that deer to make me happy. He's hunting it to make himself happy. He just happens to be doing it with a leash attached to him.
Sure.
So oftentimes, what we will hear, we'll get calls a lot. People that watch a video and there's no sign, it's rain. There's no sign. 24 hours later, and Jaeger tracks his deer a mile and finds it. And they're like, man, how does he do that? My dog is great when there's blood, but as soon as there's no blood, he just sits down and looks at me. And that's because your dog has been trained on blood. And he's given you a response when there is blood, but when there is no blood, he's not instinctively hunting that deer anymore. He's looking to you for direction. So I always want a dog that's instinctively, I'm going to go solve this problem and find this game. So again, there's a lot of great dogs, and kind of like the Broadhead Debate, what's the best tracking breed? Holy moly, can you get?
I can only imagine the chat room conversation.
And some people are breeders, some people are just trackers. I'm not a breeder, so I'm not trying to make money off this, selling dogs or anything. So it can be a topic of debate. But bottom line is there's a lot of great breeds. What you want is a dog that A, has a good nose, and then B, a good prey drive. I just think genetics for prey drive, and you'll hear that like anything. Let's just face it. Genetically, like I'm not going to be a lineman in the NFL.
Yep, me neither. That ship is sailed.
There's certain things, genetics, certainly when it comes to working dogs, matter. I mean, it's the fact of life. These are athletes. You want a dog that has the genetics, to make the cut, so to speak.
Now you mentioned Catahoula. You've seen some good tracking Catahoulas in your day. I know a lot of my buddies use those for baying hogs and stuff, and they have a real drive. I mean, they can hunt all night, it seems like.
Yeah. Deutsch Drahthaars, it's another, if you watch like the Python Cowboy down in Florida, he's got a Deutsch Drahthaar from the same kennel that bred Jaeger, on Mountain Creek in Georgia. So he breeds drafts and Teckles. And so these are dogs that they're built to hunt. And that's what, he's rolling around like a, happy dog, like, a house pet right now. But trust me, you get him, he gets outside, his nose is working. He is hunting something at all times. We just did a dove hunt, Monday, and there was a hillside wooded, a bunch of dove crashed into it, they sent a Brittany in trying to find doves that came out with one. Jaeger went in and found 6.
He just loves it.
Yeah, so it's just, it's, if he gets a chance to go find something, that's what he wants to do. So yeah, some of those in general, those taller breeds, again, Drothars, Catahoula's, Curs, Blue Lacies. You'll see a lot of Blue Lacies in Texas and that thick brush country, cactus country. And they're kind of like, they kind of remind me of almost like a more well-built greyhound, in the way they can move and how what they can cover through. And I've seen some great trackers there. And yeah, so I would certainly encourage anybody to research. All tracking dogs certainly are not bred the same, they're not trained the same, they're not built the same. So find the one that fits you.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you're on an on-leash state or not, I'll tell you right now, holding on to him with a leash, he's a strong dog. He's small, but he's very strong. When you get into some of these bigger dogs, a high prey drive, trying to hold up and control them on a leash is very difficult. So you'll see a lot of favoritism towards smaller breeds, certainly with the on-lead states.
Yep. No, that makes good sense. Yes, they're not dragging you through the woods instead of you leading them through the woods. All right, now I'm gonna pivot again on you, and not to start again. We could do a whole nother podcast on this. Is there anything you have learned or you have added or done differently to your scent control regiment? We touched on this a little bit at the mobile show. That you've learned through tracking that you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that they can smell like this, and I know a deer can smell maybe better or a different way. Is there something you have done, or have you just abandoned the scent control regimen altogether? What is what have you learned, or what do you do in that instance?
Yeah, I've my opinion on scent control is, if it helps, great. Nothing's ever going to beat the wind. And again, as so much of hunting is probability and statistics. If something buys you a few more seconds on a tight timeline encounter, is it worth the effort you took? Maybe. You don't know. I can certainly say that his sensing ability, just blows my mind. What I've seen him do. Again, tracking with no sign after rain, what's he smelling? I wish I could give him a survey and, would you say you smelt this on a scale of 1 to 10 today? But, you can't. He's got a hard time holding the pen. But, same thing with a deer nose or a bear nose, it's incredible, what they can smell. And I think a lot of it just boils down to, sometimes it's not so much what they can smell as that do they perceive it as danger. And that varies from a deer that lives on a golf course versus a deer that lives in a national forest, and never encounters a human scent versus the, urban deer that smells humans almost 24/7. And so you have to take into account the individual situation. But I am just a believer in, I do try to, if I can, where I walk and what I walk in. So certainly my boots and my access paths that I use to get to where I want to hunt. But I'm sure, as you've seen, I've been hunting and I've watched the deer cut my track and certainly alert and maybe even blow out. I've also watched deer cut my track and pay zero mind. You don't know. I like to, again, as scent free on the boots as I can. So I generally, and certainly in the South, just because I'm often trying to go through swampy areas or use water to my advantage anyway, I'm often wearing knee boots. And I'll try to be mindful. But, generally they're not covered in scent spray. They're covered in permethrin spray.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
And again, though, my opinion on that is that's not a danger scent to most deer.
Right.
It's just like ozonics, ozonics or Thermacell. A guy tested me yesterday, do you think Thermacell scares them? I'm like, no, I don't. Because I don't think they associate it with danger.
Yep.
just like I say, how many deer have been shot by somebody smoking a cigarette or a cigar?
Yeah. Until they associate it with danger. Yeah, I mean, a deer has never been killed by a bottle of DEET. They've never been killed by a bottle of DEET. They've never been killed by a bottle of perfume, and they've never been killed by a cigarette. So until they associate that time and time and time again as being danger, it's nothing like when they smell that person.
Right. So I'm conscious, very conscious of sound. Not having things clank, not having foreign sounds in the woods. But scent control, I'm always in the mindset. You can't cover your breath, and that's pumping scent. Nonstop. Certainly with bow hunters, we're always trying to get close, especially the traditional bow hunters. We're trying to get, under the 20 yards. I'm a big, I always have multiple puff bottles of chalk on me. I'm always checking the wind, and I try to be just super mindful of the wind, knowing he smells stuff. I can't imagine what they're processing, but these are animals that they're prey animals.
Yeah,
they're not predators,
right?
So they're all in defense all the time. Like it or not. Certainly, there's not a lot of big predators for them once they reach maturity. But you get the point. They're not. They are an animal evolved to defend itself. So, and their nose is certainly a huge tool in that defense arsenal.
No, that's good. That's good. Now, if a guy is new to this and he's like, man, I really want to get prepped in case I wound something or I need help from a tracker, is there a network? I mean, obviously you live in Virginia. Guys can't call you and say, hey, come down here to Charleston and help me track this deer. But do you recommend like a guy in his area go ahead and try and locate and establish a relationship with a local tracker? Hey, bud, my name's Joe Miles. I live in Richland County. I got you off this list. Just wanted to introduce myself and let you know I do a lot of hunting, and I may be giving you a call. What's your recommendation there?
Yeah, it's certainly good practice. What I will say, is tracking with Jaeger in one season for the public taught me more about what wounded deer do than 35 years of personal hunting. And trackers we live in the fringe. We see all the weird stuff. As a hunter, having him, even my own, decision making, got much easier. I'll never forget my wife came running in the kitchen in Tennessee and she's, there's a bear in the front yard. I was like, really? And then she's like, no, it's a boar. So I go out on the porch, it's in the woods now, trotting away, through some timber. I shoot it, roll it, and it squeals and gets up, runs off, big boar. And I'm like, well, I'll see you tomorrow. Like, there was zero pressure on myself to go mark a darn thing. I was like, Jaeger's, like, I'm getting up in the morning, I'm going to go find that boar.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes easier to wait. It becomes easier not to grid search when you have the resource of a good tracking dog at your disposal. So I always, it's impacted a lot of my decisions. It's helped me recover more game simply because, sure, I'm lucky I have them always at my disposal. But most trackers are very happy to help, especially once they know you and you have a relationship and they know that you're doing the right things of just marking blood, not grid searching, giving the deer time, not pushing it. Most of those trackers will gladly come help you.
Yeah.
Even if it's a shot you're confident in and you just call them up and say, hey, do you want to let the dog work it? Trackers are always looking for what practice tracks. Because, it's not like a lab, the duck dog, and I can go thaw a duck out of my freezer and throw it in the pond and, shoot some blanks in the air and try to simulate the real deal. I can't just go throw a deer in the woods. And, anytime a tracker has a chance to run its dog on an easy one, that's just an insurance track. Ultimately, it's better for you're helping. Maybe he's got a new puppy. Maybe it's just a reinforcement track. Maybe the deer tracked one that wasn't dead and he's kind of bummed out. Like, he gets depressed, when I call him off tracks.
Yeah.
He'll reset if he gets a tug on one the next day. So there are resources. It becomes easier again for the hunter to make better decisions. And there's a national group we're part of, United Blood Trackers. And there's a website, unitedbloodtrackers.org, and they have a resources tab on their website. And there's a find a tracker link. You can plug in your zip code, and all of the certified, these are dogs that have been tested. They run annual testing events where they'll lay mock tracks, and there's a UBT1 test, UBT2 test. Jaeger's done the UBT2, which is a track. I think it's a mile, aged 24 hours. That's artificially laid with like 8 ounces of blood in the whole track, and so there are testing resources that they do, but they also have that find a tracker resource, and you can plug in your zip code, and it'll come up with names and phone numbers. You can call them. So even if you're traveling across the country, you don't know anybody there, you can plug in where you're going, and you can see if there's a tracker there.
And what's the name of that again?
United Blood Trackers.
United Blood Trackers. Okay, so these are like certified dogs that this isn't Joe Schmo that just got a beagle and he signs up. I mean, United Blood Trackers. All right, that's good. Absolutely, really good.
United Blood Trackers has done a lot of. People don't realize it, but there's still states where it's not legal to track wounded game with a dog on a leash. United Blood Trackers in the last 5 years in 10 years. But particularly the last 5 has made a lot of headway in getting laws changed around legal recovery of wounded game, with a dog. In a state like Nevada, you can literally run bear or mountain lion with hounds off leash, but it's still illegal to find a deer that's already been shot with a dog on a leash. Hopefully as more people understand this, and it's just old laws around deer hunting with dogs, and it falls into that category. So until people realize on a leash, the dog's not running across property lines. The dog's not disturbing wildlife. It's under full control. And that's why so many states you have to track on leash, is because that was part of the legislation that changed to allow it to happen in the first place. There's a cluster of states in New England, I think Delaware, Rhode Island, where you still can't do it, and then kind of the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, California. They still need laws that need to change. But anyway, United Blood Trackers is a great organization. Very much support them. There's also, again, Shane Simpson has his new tracker app, TRAKR. You can download that app, and similarly, qualified dogs and handlers that he's vetted, you can find you can put in a tracking request, and it'll help you find the one nearest to you. And then there's a new American Blood Trackers Association. It has a new kind of group in the South that's kind of popped up. And they're doing some tests now for off-leash dogs, since that's more prominent in the South.
Gotcha.
So those are 3 resources, but again, it's never going to hurt. And I travel to hunt a lot. To call ahead, see who's in the area, just introduce yourself and say, hey, if I need your services, are you available? And it's a fair question to ask, what people charge. Some people charge for tracking. Some people do it on a volunteer basis for donations.
Sure.
So, we tend to do it on a donation basis. But, it's one of the great things about hunting in North America is you don't have to be rich to hunt. It's not an elitist segment of the world like, hunting in Europe may be.
Right.
And I don't want people to not look for a deer that they know they wounded because they're worried about how much it costs. But again, that varies. It is a tracker's time. There are vet bills involved. Jaeger often gets hurt on a track, and it often takes half a day. Or easy tracks can happen in 10, 15 minutes. Hard ones can take a long time. Just be respectful and understand that people do it for different reasons, but ultimately trackers are doing what they do because they like helping other hunters, have a good ending to their hunting story.
Yeah, I'm really interested in it, and I would love to at some point get a dog and start doing it some. Just out of not only the selfish is the right thing. It's just because we shoot a lot of stuff down here, and I got a lot of buddies that hunt, and it would be great to have one. And just for me, timing and traveling and probably not right now where I am in my life, not being able to spend just quite enough time. But I think in the next 2 to 5 years, I will definitely be looking into to getting started on some level.
Yeah, well, we're always here to help. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, tell us some more. We've been on here for about an hour now, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but guys that want to follow along with you and Jaeger, what is their best way? I know you've got the YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook. Tell everybody how they can follow along and keep up with you guys.
Sure. So we're at Jaeger Tracks. So Jaeger's Jaeger. That's hunter in German for those that didn't know. So we started the Jaeger Tracks channel on YouTube, and Instagram, Facebook, and then my personal channels, Damon Bungard, outdoors on YouTube and on social. And there's if you go to the Jaeger Tracks website, there's www.jaegertracks.com. There's a lot of information there on Teckles. There's a page there, called What's a Teckle, that explains a lot of their breed and their history. And then, there's a page in the media where, I'll put a link to this podcast and examples of podcasts other podcasts we've done, books we've been in, TV appearances, things like that are all in that media page. So, luckily we've been around. A lot of people know his beard more than mine. But it's been fun. And, our season just started. We were down in Tennessee for the velvet buck hunt and tracked a young man's, first buck, and it was in 17 hours, after it was shot. It was Gutshot, and lost, grid searched and lost, and, Jaeger found ultimately pretty quickly. So that's what we do. As our seasons unfold, I'm still trying to edit footage from 2022.
Wow.
So, I got a lot of stuff backed up, but again, as we do ones that I feel have a good lesson in them, and there's good sign. We really, on the channel, we try to break it down and show the sign, explain the story, and not only talk about challenges and that might help other handlers with how they read their dog and how they make their decisions while they are tracking, but also hunters to understand, if this decision had been made or not, the track could be so much easier, or their odds of not eating a dog might even be there too. So, so much hinges on those decisions after the shot. Just if I have any requests for those listening, it's give it as much time as you can, and don't grid search. Again, that when your own tracking via sight, switches from looking at sign to searching for it, that's a good time to back out.
Yeah, for sure.
And every tracker will thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other thing to take away here is to create a relationship in your area with your local tracker or your local tracker guys. Go ahead and be proactive there, so it's not some random, 10 o'clock at night trying to search and find a tracker. You've already got that relationship started, so be proactive there and go ahead and make a relationship. And heck, you may can go ahead and give a donation to a guy and be kind of top of the list, because I know they, when season gets rolling, I'm sure, sometimes you'll get 3-4 calls a day, and you've got to make a decision on which one to go track. And a guy that's been proactive and has maybe helped out with your donations or whatever, he's going to be at the top of the list.
For sure. And the one that didn't grid search, the one that backed out, the one that gave it time. If a guy calls me and, we've already bumped a deer 3 times. I've had the football team out with me looking for it. Those are the ones that, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I can help you. Versus, I got the guy that calls 10 minutes before that says, I think I hit a little back. I backed out. It's been 24 hours and I got, 1,000 acres versus the guy, that bumped it off of his 20 acre plot and he doesn't know where it is.
Yeah.
So, these are all, it's the realities of what happens in the woods, and these are the realities of the phone calls we get. And certainly as the seasons change and weapons change and the rut rolls around, I'll commonly get 15 calls a day during peak rut.
That's amazing.
So it's, and we're not, there are trackers that do it for a living and they track hundreds a season. And then there's trackers, I don't have that kind of time. I'll try to, if he gets to track 1 a week, he's a happy dog. So, I try to, during the season at least, if the most we've done is 4 in a day. And that's hard on them. I like a few a week, a couple a week as the season's going on.
Well, that's great. Damon, man, thank you so much for coming on. Again, guys, y'all check out Damon, follow along with what he's got going on, and I would encourage everybody, including myself, to make a contact with a local tracker so you've got that feather in your cap. Damon, thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on. You bet.
Yeah, man.
Always happy to help. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.